And just for the welcome, mayors. Welcome to the Economic Mobility Leadership Institute. We're glad you joined us for our second session in the 2024 mayoral cohort. My name is Stacy Fujii, and I'm with the African American Mayors Association. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to AMA's EMLI Wealth Management and Roundtable discussion. This is the second year for our premier Economic Mobility Leadership Institute, and we're focusing on critical learning opportunities for mayors and their teams to create strategic economic mobility plans to implement in your respective municipalities. Today's discussion will focus on building wealth in our communities. How do we do it? And what have been the pitfalls to better financial standing for our community? This hour-long session will provide insight into the necessary and helpful tools needed to develop greater opportunities for wealth creation in your communities. Today, our partner, David Adefeso of the Pacific Group, will share with us his journey and understanding of wealth and offer insight around initiatives designed to build wealth in your respective communities. After our conversation with David, we will proceed with our roundtable discussion with you, our esteemed cohort. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Carlos Nichols, Managing Director and Chief of Staff of the African American Mayors Association, for the welcome. Carlos.
Welcome, mayors. It is such a pleasure to see each of you virtually and your staff. We've had a great first session during our in-person meeting at the AMA conference and look forward to engaging you and your staff in the coming months. As you know, AMA's Economic Mobility Leadership Institute is focusing on critical learning opportunities for mayors and their teams with the goal of creating strategic economic mobility plans to implement in your respective municipalities. Those plans will feature events and tools that are designed to educate and increase your residents' financial literacy and well-being. Today, we begin our second session of our listening and learning phase. For the next 6 months, industry experts will share their knowledge and tools with you to help you develop your customized strategic plans. The second half of the project will consist of you implementing your plans by hosting events in your respective cities. After today's session, please begin developing your ideas around an event that will highlight wealth management within your constituency. The EMLI staff is here to support your efforts and will be available to assist you. We hope that you see the value of this cohort and ask that you submit feedback in your monthly survey coming in the following days. Thank you so much for your participation and your kind consideration. Back to you, Stacy.
Thank you, Carlos. We have a couple of housekeeping items to consider. First, a LinkedIn invitation for our private EMLI group should be in your inbox. The LinkedIn group will be an important way the cohort shares additional information from our guest and will serve as a way for AMA to communicate with you and your designated staff. Please make sure your main contact has a LinkedIn account, and please accept the invitation or let Darian Vason or myself know if you did not get an invitation. Second, as cohort members, your strategic plans will be supported with a $30,000 grant to be used in supporting your efforts. We will follow up with you regarding the best way for your city to receive those monies. Please remember to use the chat feature box to ask questions throughout the session, and please also put yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Without further ado, let's begin. David Adefeso is the CEO of the Pacific Group, a leading wealth management and financial advisory firm based in Los Angeles that he started 19 years ago. The Pacific Group understands no two paths to wealth are identical and takes a holistic approach to an individual's financial situation and finding the best way to protect and grow wealth. Mr. Adefesto has gone from homeless to Harvard and is a true champion of financial literacy. He is a certified public accountant, worked on Wall Street as an investment banker, and is also the founder and CEO of a revolutionary wealth growth platform made for the underserved and underrepresented children in America called Suchi. Please welcome David to the Economic Mobility Leadership Institute.
Hello, mayors. Over the past half a decade or so, I've mentored many children and adults. I'd say dozens. Now I mentor about 24. And I found it interesting why people always wanted to know my experiences. They always wanted to learn about me, and I couldn't understand why. And much of it arose from going from homelessness, a homeless African immigrant, to rising to a place where I could basically do whatever I wanted. I had enough financial resources, I had enough relationships, and I had enough what we in America define as success to be able to decide on the things I wanted to do and how I spend my days, ultimate freedom. So today I'm going to share with you some of my story. And along the way, I'll tell you some of the things that in retrospect really helped me. And then I'll sort of culminate with how I define wealth and maybe some of the tools that you can use in your own cities to actually help your constituencies build wealth. I'm 54 years old. I came to America when I was 21 years old. I hopped on an airplane. I didn't have any money. By the way, I didn't get my visa in Lagos, where I'm from. I had to travel to where my ambassador uncle was. He was an ambassador in Togo. And, I don't know how, much you know about Africa, about how difficult it is to get a visa, especially from Nigeria. Everybody wants to come to America. So I literally had to travel to go ask my ambassador to help me. And I got my visa in Togo. And then I came to America. I didn't have a lot of money. I had $250. And I hopped on an airplane, got to JFK. I had to get to LAX. And it literally took me 5 hours in the airport, circling the airport from American Airlines. I had $250. It's $1,000. It was $800 United. I was going from terminal to terminal to terminal to terminal. It took me 5 hours with my massive amounts of luggage to find an airplane to LA. It cost me $198. So I got to Los Angeles with a little under $60. And I knocked on the door of my cousin in Inglewood, California, and he didn't open the door. He basically didn't want me. So I had a brother who was here who I wasn't very close with, but I called him, and lucky for me, I got to stay with him for about 3 months. And then 3 months after that, after I got there, he told me, "Look, I'm moving out, and I'm going to a different apartment." And I said, "Cool. When are we going?" And he said, "You're not coming with me." And so 3 months after I got here, I find myself basically homeless. I didn't live on the street. I lived in a place in an apartment building that was vacant and was for sale. And I consider myself actually to be lucky in that respect. I was there for 6 months, and the owner of the house found me and basically said, he was devastated to say, "A good man." My sheets were I was working, just so you know, I was making $4.25. I was working in retail. I was working as an accountant, and I was working, odd jobs here and there. I never made more than $4.25, basically. But my shirts were my bed sheets were my shirts, and my suit, the 2 suits I had, were basically my blankets. I was there for 6 months. He found me, and he said, "You know what? I got to find you a place to live." So he found me a place with a man who was a Nigerian. And so I got to live with a Nigerian man and 9 Mexicans in a 2-bedroom apartment in Compton, California. And the 2-bedroom apartment, if you can imagine what your bathroom looks like, I had one of the bedrooms, by the way. So if you can imagine what your bathroom looks like, it was about the size of my room. And, I survived, there. And I always considered myself to be underserved and underrepresented, but I don't think so anymore. I think I actually had a significant advantage coming to America, but I'll tell you about that in a second. Anyway, needless to say, 2 years after I got here, I passed the CPA exams. If you know much about the CPA, only 3% of people pass the exams at the first sitting, all 4 parts. I did it, I passed it, I was top 3% in America. which propelled me 2 years later to Harvard Business School, which propelled me later on to Wall Street. I worked in a place called Citigroup Capital Markets. Then it was called Salomon Smith Barney. I worked for Jamie Dimon, who now runs JP Morgan, who's the CEO. I probably did about $90 to $95 billion in mergers, acquisitions, corporate financing. My job was to buy companies and put them together. I bought US Healthcare for $9.8 billion in 1998 for Aetna. Tenet, Med Partners, American Airlines. So I did those deals. You want to go public, you come to me. You want to buy, a company, you come to me. You need financing, you need $2 billion, you need $1 billion in debt or equity financing, you come to me. And I had a very, very successful career. And then I decided to switch careers because I didn't really enjoy what I did. And we'll talk about that, at the end. It was basically the sole pursuit of money. Wall Street for me was sole pursuit of money. There was no moral, tenet. It was basically just doing whatever was necessary to beat the next guy in order to get the deal. And that just didn't sit well with me. So after I graduated, I left Wall Street. I set up my own business, the Pacific Group, and I expanded the business across America over 20 years. I had an office in New York, 34th and Madison. I had Dallas, I had Fort Worth. I had multiple offices in Los Angeles. And then I consolidated my operations about 5 years ago. And I turned around 5 years ago and I realized that I was not happy. And that took me on a journey over 5 years to a place now where I basically have a lot of joy. I have a lot of material wealth, but I also have something that is very, very intangible and which you really can't buy. And so many people, I've kind of summarized my life for you. So many people kind of ask me along the way, well, David, how did you go from being homeless to Harvard, to go to Wall Street, to setting up your own business, to becoming a multi-millionaire? And, basically I can buy whatever I want. I've had the Rolls Royces, I've had the penthouses, I've been on TV, I've been on reality TV shows, I have my face on magazines and TV shows and all that. And I a while back, I had to really step back and ask the question, what were the things that helped me build wealth? But before I discuss those things, let me talk about what my definition of wealth is. Wealth to me is the physical and non-physical resources that enable you to have the freedom to pursue your purpose. Life is really about purpose. So I talk to a lot of kids in colleges. I do a lot of graduation speeches. And one of the things I tell children and adults is about following their purpose. Wealth, in many, many ways, is something that we categorize as material, money. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's a part of money. That's a part of wealth. But money itself doesn't actually really give you wealth. Money gives you material things. And so I teach a lot of people how to change their relationship with money, how they think about money. And I tell them, if you chase money, you won't get it. But if you chase your purpose, money will chase you. And so I'll tell you a few of the things that I have learned along the way. Some of them are things that I inherently had as a person. They were just things I had in me. Some of the things that made me successful were things that I learned along the way. And some of the things I've learned along the way is that there are very, very large cultural differences between, let's just say, Black people who move here from overseas and Black people, African Americans who live here. And some of those gaps we need to bridge in order to truly build wealth. So when I came to America, one of the things I had was hope. One of our great leaders always has this saying, the audacity of hope. As I travel across America over the past 5 years, in many, many places, I see you, Yolanda and East Point. I've been to your city with Mayor Diana. I've been to Union City and Forest Park, and I've been to Kingston, North, and I've been to Chester, Pennsylvania, and I've been to all of the places in the South and in the East that really need our help. And I've talked to a lot of people, and sometimes I look at a kid, and I don't see that light of hope in their eyes. And the reason why is because it's almost like they don't see any opportunity. They see a glass ceiling. And that's the one thing that I didn't have. I never really had. Growing up, I mentioned that going through life in America, I always thought I was underserved. I always thought I had a disadvantage. No, no, no. I had an advantage. I didn't start on first base. I started on third base. Let me tell you why. I had three things. And those things were things I believe I was given. They were not things that I was able to build myself. And the first thing was I had a college degree and I had no student debt. And so part of my purpose now over the past 5 years is helping children, African American children, Hispanic children, Native American children who are underserved attain a higher education. Because nothing is more important than having the knowledge to understand what your purpose is and using that knowledge to actually create wealth. So having a college degree was the first thing I had that was so important because I got to learn so much. I hear these days about people talking about the unimportance of college and the value of college and whether it makes sense to go to college. And by the way, when I say college, I'm not talking about UCLA 4-year. It could be a 2-year institution. It could be a trade school. It could be a work training program. Anything that helps you develop a skill and learn how to absorb information and how to think and how to reason. Something that helps you intersect with people who don't look like you, people who are white, who are black, who are foreigners, the ability to think. That's what a higher education does for you. So the first and most important thing, I believe, actually not the most important is coming, is that I had a college degree and I had no student debt. The second thing I had, which was something I was given, which I really couldn't have created myself, was I had parents. My parents were together for 50 years. And growing up in a country that was filled with, at that time, it was probably maybe next to Afghanistan, considered the most corrupt country in the world. It's changed a lot now because of the wealth. I grew up in an environment where if you steal, there was such poverty that if you go to the market and if you steal, they say, ole, ole, that's thief, thief. They chase you down. They catch you. They beat you. They take tires and they put those tires on you, right? And then they put gasoline and they light a match. So that sort of environment, which was so carnal, is how I grew up. And I grew up in a place where the value was basically, quick, easy, money. And so corruption was very, very high. My father was one of maybe 3 or 4 men. I didn't know a lot of people. I grew up in a very closed environment. We had an upper class, family. I didn't grow up in a very wealthy or poor family. I was poor in America by choice. I could have gone back to Africa and had a cook and a steward and driver, but I couldn't go back to Africa because I came to America to make it. What am I going to tell my parents? I failed and I'm coming back home. So I had to make it work. I had no choice. So the second thing I had, my dad was probably the most 2 or 3 honest men. Was one of 2 or 3 honest men I knew in Nigeria at the time, and all of my siblings, his children, basically took his personality. Were extraordinarily honest to a fault. So I grew up with parents who taught me some very, very basic values: honesty, resilience, hard work, love. Then the third thing I had was something that's propelled me all of my career. And if there's anything I instill in children today, it's finding an anchor. An anchor could be, for many young kids, is the parent. Something, life beats you up. You get beaten up, you get robbed, you get, hurt, you get smashed, you get, there's so many bad things that happen to you in life. And if you don't have a frame of reference, if you don't have an anchor, somebody you can lean on, whether it's a mentor, whether it's meditation, whether it's a parent, then you're liable to falter. For me, it's God. I've always had God in my life, and that sail of blessings has always pretty much followed me. And so by subscribing to biblical principles, I've basically, overcome pretty much every obstacle by just going into the Bible and trying to understand what was going on with me. So those were the advantages I had when I came to America. Those are advantages that I can't replicate in anyone, but The things that you can replicate are some of the things I'm going to talk about now. The first thing, like I said, was I had hope when I came to America. I had hope. I really needed to succeed. And there was just no ceiling. I had no ceiling. If you've ever been to Africa, you look around and the most similar personality and confidence style that is similar to an African or Caribbean are children who went to HBCUs. I've seen that pride in them. And the reason why is because when you grow up in Africa, you see that the TVs are all Black people. The president is Black, the governor is Black, the business owners, the billionaires and the millionaires are all Black. So to you aspire to be like those people, and they're Black people. So there's no ceiling in front of you, right? And you can be president, you could be governor, you could be billionaire, you could be a pastor, you could do whatever you want to do. So that lack of a ceiling, that audacity of hope, that lack of fear, that unbridled enthusiasm for life is something that I often see in HBCU graduates, who, they go to these four-year institutions and everybody's Black and the institutions are Black and they provide support and they get to love Black people, they get to love what they do, and they have that sense of pride that I've seen. And so if we're going to be successful as a race, we have to rebuild that sense of pride in who we are. And so that was sort of the first thing that I had. The second thing, I think, speaking again about God, I got to Harvard, and people ask me, well, how did you get to Harvard? You came from Lagos, and in 4 years, you got to an institution that everyone around the world wants to go to. Well, do you know what happened? When I was 11 years old, I went to a school called the University of Lagos elementary school. It was a school on campus. My mom was a nurse, and that hospital she worked in was connected to a elementary school and a high school. So every day I used to go, after school to my mom's office, and I'd sit there. She'd, give me food, and I had a great time. I talked to her, and I remember she reminded me of this when I got to Harvard. She said, "You remember when you told me what you told me when you were 11 years old?" I said, "What?" She said, "You told me you wanted to go to Harvard." And I remembered. The power of speaking your purpose cannot be overstated. The Bible, if you believe in the Bible, if you go to Proverbs 18:21, I read, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it eat its fruits." You want to be successful, speak it and believe it. The third thing I think that really helped propel me was I've never really been one who sought things out for myself. It's interesting to say, when I meet people, if I've met you, right? If I've met any of you, usually the first thing I ask you is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I be of service to you? What can I do for you? That's how I grew up. And let me tell you what happens when you do that. When you ask what you can do for someone, let me give you a quick example. You need something, your car broke down, and you're stuck on the freeway. Somebody stops by, helps you jumpstart the car, helps you connect your car, and helps, connect the car, tow the car, stays with you for 30 minutes, gets you to the place you need to go, and then walks away and you say, "Thank you, what can I do for you?" And they're like, "You can't do anything, thank you." What are the feelings you have for that person? Love, because that person showed you love. And so I just had a personality of asking what I can do. And that personality engendered many, many people to me, people who want to help me, business people. I read an article that Stacy, you sent about 15 billionaires in America, or 15 billionaires, and 9 of them being in America. I've been privileged to work with some of those billionaires, both in Africa and in America. I've been privileged to work with professional athletes, celebrities. I've been privileged to see all of those things. And the first question I always ask them is, what can I do for you? It really builds love. And then you have a lot of people who now feel like they owe you. And when you make that call to them 6 months later, 1 year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, they'll remember what you did because you were the one person who gave without asking for anything in return. Finally, when people come into my office now and they want to work with me, whether they're a $65,000 earner, whether they're a $40 million professional athlete, I always talk to them about wealth and money. And I find out many people, their relationship with money is very, very important, because if you have the wrong relationship with money, you tend to chase the wrong things. And so it's three things that I always sort of try to impart over a long period of time. Now, keep in mind, I'm not going to give you all the answers. I'm always available. Like I said, if any of you need me, I'll come into your city. We have whole financial literacy budgeting courses. We have things that we do to help inform people. But the three things is to first understand that money is not power. Money is very, very powerful, but money is not power. Money helps you achieve certain things, but through true power is having that internal resilience and having that freedom to achieve whatever you want to do. Number two, 80% of wealth is psychology. If you're poor, if you think you're poor, then you're poor. I have extraordinarily wealthy people come into my office, and they're miserable. They're divorced, they're unhappy, they're sad, and things are going on because they don't feel wealthy. And then I have young people who are achieving their purpose. They're traveling around the world. They're working in a nonprofit. They're not making any money, and they feel powerful. They feel rich. They feel fulfilled. They're achieving their purpose. The final thing, the wealthiest people don't work 9 to 5. It's a lie when they tell you go be a lawyer, go be an accountant, go be a doctor, go be an engineer. All those things are nice and good. To truly build wealth, to be one of those billionaires, you got to follow 4 or 5 steps. Number one, you got to identify an anomaly. What is broken? Every day you walk by people, you see things on the road, you see things you know things that are broken. You can see it, and you know you can fix it. 99% of people talk about problems. They don't take the next step to help fix those problems. Number two, learn everything you can about the problem. Become the expert. Become the person who has the most knowledge about that topic in the entire world. Why? If somebody else knows more about that thing than you, then they're going to eat your lunch one day. They'll take your money one day. Number three, build the resources necessary for you to solve that problem. The resources involved, get the right team, get the right mentor, get the money, which is very hard for some of us, especially, because we've never really had wealth in our community. Get the necessary resources, find those resources. And number four, the most important, there is no work-life balance when it comes to finding that. You basically dig in, whether you got to work 100 hours a week. I remember working on Wall Street. I'd go into work on Monday, I'd leave on Tuesday night. It's called an all-nighter. We were killing ourselves working. We worked so hard. And I work 18, 19 hours a day now. I went to bed at 5 o'clock. I was up at 7:30 to prepare for this. And so, again, I want to kind of stop here. There's a lot, if you want to reach me, I'm actually going to put my cell phone number in here. If anyone wants to reach me, please, text me. I'm available. This is what I do. This is my purpose. And so if I can help you, help your constituencies, please reach out to me anytime. I'll take some questions.
Mayors, feel free to go ahead and ask if you have any questions for David.
I like that, a smart group, no questions, which means everybody knows everything I talked about.
Well, David, this is Derek Rainey over at the city of Wrightsville. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. That's the power that I've also experienced today, which is hearing your story and the transition, the process, the mindset. But I do have a question as well, specifically with the Pacific Group or with the way you've established the pathway to wealth management and building. And you talked about mindset. How have you helped transition the mindset of people who have traditionally been impoverished in their thinking?
Wow, that is a $3,000 question.
I got you.
Okay, so our biggest problem is our mindset. Knowledge. Knowledge is power. And historically, if you go back, Frederick Douglass, old slave abolition, 1856, it is much easier to raise strong children than it is to repair broken men. We have a lot of broken men, right? Our families have been torn apart. We have, a lot of, kids, who grow up with no hope. And that mindset is a critical thing. Well, let me tell you what we're doing. We have a program called Financial Intelligence. It's a program that's designed to help people break the old habits of the past and rethink money, how they relate to money. I'll give you a quick example. Mindset is really about detail. Let me give you an example. You make $50,000, right? And you think, I make $50,000. Well, let me change the example. Let me give you a real example. I have a professional athlete coming to my office. He makes $13 million, right? And he feels he makes $13 million, so he wants to spend $13 million. Oops. I'm sorry, my brother. You don't make $13 million. Let me tell you why. You probably make $1.5 million. Let me repeat. You probably make $1.5 million. First, you pay 50% taxes. If you live in California, New York, Chicago, 39% federal taxes, 13% state taxes. In California, 12 to 13%. That's over 50%. Okay. Well, how about you? Don't forget about your Social Security and Medicare taxes, 7.65%. That's almost 60%. How about your agents, 10%? How about your manager, 15%? Now you're left with 25%. Well, how about your property taxes? You own a home, right? How about your sales taxes? You like to buy shoes, you like to buy, airplane tickets, you like to buy gasoline in your car. You make less than $1.5 million. And so understanding how to wield money is not necessarily about just budgeting, right? And saving in a 20% bank account and investing in a stock or a bond. It's understanding your relationship with money and how you think about money. So that's just one quick example of how we help people with real practical examples. It's all about practical. When I hear a lot of people talking about all these nice, wonderful things about find your purpose and all these. You got to tell me how it applies to me in the community, and that's really what we do. So whenever if you're interested, I'll be happy to share the program with you, and maybe come into your city and actually help. We do it in-person learning and we do it digital learning.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I'll be
You're
interested.
welcome. Mm-hmm.
Do we have anybody else that has a question for David? Well, as you think about it, we're about to actually roll into our roundtable portion, and we're going to ask David to stay on with us. We appreciate that fantastic presentation. And we're just going to have an open discussion, which I encourage all of you to respond. This is so we can just really kind of wrap our heads around what is wealth. I want to share a couple of statistics with you. According to a February 18th, 2022 Black Enterprise Magazine article, there are 2,755 billionaires in the world, but only 15 are Black. Only 9 of the 15 are American, and only 2 of the 15 are women. What did those 15 know that the rest of us don't know? On some level, they understand money, much like David was talking about. They understand terms like assets, budgets, depreciation, investments, passive income, savings, stocks, and return on investments. In order to create wealth, we must understand money. So now we're going to have like kind of an interactive part of our roundtable. I want to ask you, how do you define wealth? What does wealth look like in the African American community? Please write your answer in the chat, and you might get called on, so get ready to talk. And Keviana is going to monitor the chat, and Keviana, please. read out some of our answers and who said it.
I'll also go ahead and unspotlight you all so it can be a group discussion
Fantastic. Thank you.
first.
So we're all a big family here. We're not playing the quiet game either. So if you don't put something in the chat, I will call on you. So yeah, how do you define wealth? When we did this exercise before, we found that people had some very interesting answers. And typically it fell along the lines of generations. And if you are representing your mayor, please feel free to answer. That's okay too. Just say who you're representing.
So it looks like Jean Finley put in the chat, wealth is process where you can build a platform for personal and business freedom.
Nice. That sounds a lot like David's explanation for wealth. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Finley. Kayla, what do you think wealth is?
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Kyla. So I was just typing in the group chat, but I guess I'll just speak out loud. I define wealth as breaking generational curses. We've come so far in regards to our accessibility to wealth. I think we are rich in many ways as Black people or people of color. We're rich in our resources. We are rich in creativity, innovation. We are rich in so many ways. But in regards to having that physical wealth or wealth of money, we have been kind of passed over in some instances. So breaking that generational curse of not having that exact access to wealth as other people of color or other groups of people is how I define wealth.
Ms. Rice, if I if I may just say a few words on that. Pew Research, the global research agency, said last December, Black African Americans have a median net worth of 27,100. That's assets, what you own, minus liabilities, what you owe. Your median net worth, 27,100. Hispanics, 46,000. Asians, 326,000. 12 times more than us. And whites, 256,000, 9 times more than us. They also said the reasons why. For Hispanics, it's immigration, they're younger. You got to be, you can't be 75 years old running across the border. For Blacks, it's a history of racism, segregation, and all the wealth that was lost. Think Black Wall Street, think Tulsa, Oklahoma, think all that wealth that's lost, right? And so we are, Malik Yoba, who's the actor, is one of my closest friends, and we're creating a platform now to help solve some of the cultural issues that we have, where we control the culture, we control the music, we control the sports, we control all of the cultural, we only make less than 5% of that wealth. And so having that mindset that we are already wealthy, we have it. All we have to do is just take the necessary steps to go take what is already ours. We're not poor. We're very, very, very wealthy. We just need to recognize that. That's a really great point.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that insight as well.
One of my colleagues, I'm Mary Small, the assistant to Mayor Sampson Borgela in the city of North Lauderdale. One of my colleagues said to me once in a previous employment, said that they were astounded by African Americans because with all the resources that we have here, the only thing we have an abundance of is excuses. And I said to them, well, you are immigrant. Are you wealthy? And she said, no. I said, but you're an immigrant. And according to you, that's the only thing you need to be, not African American. So then as Mr. Adefiso said, I used to work in civil rights administration. So I went on to explain to them the present effect of past discrimination and how respective countries, you see you. in our country, we seldom see us. I have a colleague who all of his life, all he has known are Black people. He's about 70 years old. I can't even imagine that, because all I've ever known were white people oppressing Black people. It was to the point that I didn't even realize that I was being oppressed until I went off to college. And then I went off to grad school, and I went on and on. And they used to even ask me, how did you do this? You know, the same thing. How did you end up at this university? And I said, I applied. You know, it's as simple as that. And so, you know, one of the things that I, you know, coming from rural South Georgia, and now I'm in a city where the majority of the population is Black. They are mostly immigrants. The unemployment rate is 3%, but the poverty rate is like 16%, which means that someone is getting underpaid. And so you have to take time to understand, you know, what is causing the poverty. You have to do your research. And at the same time, those who have acquired a to lift, they have to learn to invest in the community. You know, there's a risk factor involved because the jealousy sets in. Some people just can't, we don't trust each other. You know, we'll go down to McDonald's and spend and, you know, buy a burger there, but we won't go across the street at Miss Emma's joint and buy a burger from her. So we have to learn to overcome that innate, well, I don't want to say that conditioned distrust that we have of each other, and we have to want to invest in our own people. You know, that's not meaning discriminate against whites or Latinos or anyone else, but when you look at their experience, that's exactly what they did. They invest in their own people. They continue to invest in their own people. And until we learn that concept, we're going to struggle. So I know that's why we're all here today. We're actually learning to trust each other, to lift each other up, and invest in our own people. And that's the benediction.
We also
Deviana,
have,
can you
yeah, I
go
was
ahead,
gonna
dear?
say we have a couple of thoughts in the chat. And so starting back with, I know Mayor Rainey did speak, but he said in the chat, wealth in the Black community, specifically in Riceville, Arkansas, stem on education, land possession, and the perception of financial freedom. So we have that contribution. And then he also added that he personally believes that it's legacy building with financial, real property, and general assets that allow for economic mobility. Dr. Omari from Jackson, Mississippi. He's representing Jackson, Mississippi. If you want to jump in, you also can. But he says, I define wealth as an appreciation of who we are and what we bring to the table, but also as being healthy physically and mentally and having the financial resources to take care of our needs. Thought that was really impactful. Dr. Omari, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that I agree with so much of the conversation that's taken place before, particularly about changing our perspective about what wealth is, because so often we do think it's the material things that don't necessarily make us happy. We can have the big house and the big car and all of those things and still be miserable people. I really believe that we have to work on self-love. And having grown up in a segregated community in the South, we learned that we could rely on ourselves, right? That we could take care of ourselves. The men in the community, they had skills. They were carpenters and plumbers and a lot of the things that a segregated society denied us access to on the outside, we built for ourselves and we flourished and we prospered. And I think that a lot of what we see now with the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion and our history and knowing who we are is because we were so successful in the past at doing for ourselves and building wealth. So I think I was so struck, Ms. Tadafeso, about by your attention to the spiritual aspect of wealth, and how if we think impoverished, if we think like we're impoverished, we're going to be impoverished. And I think that we really have to work hard to change that attitude in our community, and that attitude about even, and I'm speaking from the perspective of having gone through major water crises in this city, where the poorest of our residents didn't have access to clean water. But you know, when they would call or when you would talk to them, they would say things like, "Well, I'm okay. I got some bottled water." But Miss Josie next door, she 80 years old. She don't have no children. I need two things of water so I can make sure I give her one. And that's how our community came together to pull through that. And that's wealth. You know, that resilience that we have as a people in the face of adversity is wealth. And I think we have to talk about that and talk about how that can transform into those things that we traditionally consider wealth. So I really appreciate this whole discussion, and thank you for the opportunity to participate.
And Dr. Omari, like I said, I grew up in rural Georgia, and I often tell people, you know, someone said, Mary, you say things that most people would be ashamed to say. I said, well, when you grew up as poor as I did, there is no shame. But one of the things that I used to say to people is that when we had hogs and chickens and everything else you could imagine, I said, but when we killed a hog, the community would come together, and we would share pieces of that hog with the community, and that's how we survived. And I always thought that it was always amazing to me that people thought that my grandfather was so wealthy, and I didn't realize that, you know, black, white, everybody in my community would have been considered poor compared to the cities that I lived in. But you know, we were just poorer. But everyone in the city, if you had something, you shared it. You shared it with the community because you never know when you might need. And like you said, if we can get back to that, if we can get back to that self-love, because I never thought I was inferior to anyone. My grandparents, they, you know, unfortunately, and it may have not been right, they taught me that it was the other groups that were inferior. And I want us to get to the point where we used to say in the African American community, we don't kill ourselves. We don't do that. We don't jump off this. You know, we turn to God. But now we don't have that anymore. We see more and more African Americans committing suicide. We see more, you know, we shoot each other down. That's not something, that was just something that was alien to me. And I used to say, well, that's a city thing. You know, even as an adult and as a college educated individual, I used to say that's a city thing. And then all of a sudden it hit my hometown and I was astounded. And it was because there is a new generation who does not know God, who does not know Joseph. So it's been an interesting transition, but I do believe that we can get back there if we try, especially when you have people like us advocating it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Small. That's excellent. I'm going to throw out another question for you. This is such an exciting cohort. We could probably sit here and talk for the rest of the afternoon. But let me ask you this, and actually this is going to be, I'm going to ask David this question, but if any of you want to add to it, please feel free. This question is, where did you learn about wealth? And do you have a specific book, magazine, podcast, or tool you recommend to enhance learning?
I didn't learn about wealth at home because my parents didn't know to teach me. And that's the same with many of our community. But again, I was really blessed because I studied accounting in college and I learned about numbers. And then I went to, you know, I became an accountant. At the same time, I was doing tutoring, and I was waiter at Tony Roma's restaurant. I had 3 jobs in order to build, money to go to school. And I, through my experiences as an accountant, and then as a Wall Street investment banker, and then so I really was blessed because I had a sort of a path, an easier path, a more streamlined path. I actually picked accounting in college. And if I were to say something in terms of the value of a college education, many people talk about maybe college isn't worth it now. Well, the reason why is because many children don't do the math. If you go do, philosophy, psychology, it's amazing. African American studies is a truly amazing thing when you learn about it. But then you graduate, and then your mates are doctors and lawyers or engineers, and then you have $200,000 in student debt or $150,000 in student debt, and so it's very, very important for you to pick courses in school, majors in school that make sense to you. But that's not all. The going through life, I had people like me who same career choices, same things, who, are not anywhere close when it comes to wealth. And again, we don't define wealth by just money, but that too. But they're not even close. And the reason why is because of my own part of it is my faith, and also part of it is my own desire to follow my purpose. A book that I would recommend is one of the most basic books that has been around for over a decade, which I've read multiple times. And the reason why I'm going to talk about it now is because in our community, we often want the easier, because of the proliferation of social media, which has brought to the forefront. Normally when you live in your neighborhood, you see your uncle, you see your friends, everybody's around you, around the same socioeconomic wealth, around the same beauty, around the same. Now you turn on social media and you're comparing yourself to people who are, extraordinarily beautiful, but with all kinds of enhancements. So we have a lot of people feeling they're inadequate. And then you find a lot of people who show wealth, they show cars, and so you compare yourselves to those people. And so it's very, very important for us to instill back the values of hard work, resilience, saving, budgeting, investing, and that true wealth is actually built slowly. So the book I'm going to recommend is called The Millionaire Next Door. I read the book at Harvard, and it changed my life because every time I made $100, I would always take $20 of that and I'd put it aside in the bucket for no matter what. I was paying myself, because true wealth is built by the not the NBA player or the rapper or the celebrity. True wealth is built the dry cleaner across the street, the small business owner, the plumber who's saving $3,000 every month, $2,000 every month, and investing that money, and that money is growing. So if you go read The Millionaire Next Door, it's truly, for me at least, it was life-changing.
Thank you for that recommendation. I see in the chat that Miss Yolanda from East Point said she listens to Myron Golden podcast mostly and Dr. Miles Monroe books on leadership. She says those are 2 of her favorites. And I apologize, team, but we're at the end of our time together. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We recorded today's session and we'll make it available online so you can go back and watch it or share it with your staff. You'll also be sent copies of today's presentation items for your review. Special thanks to our partner, Mr. David Adefeso of the Pacific Group, for joining our second session. You'll be seeing him again because he has another amazing platform that allows you to save for your children's education. So we look forward to seeing him again on one of our sessions. And he's also shared his cell phone number with you, and he'll be sharing information with us throughout this season of learning, and we'll make sure you have it on the LinkedIn page. Stay tuned for more information about our upcoming session on June 6th, 2024. It'll be on home ownership. And be sure to follow us on social media at Our Mayors and visit us online at ourmayors.org. Thank you for joining us today. This concludes our session.